Hello, and welcome to this Incisor tutorial, Introduction to Timelines. This tutorial is a great follow-up to our video covering constructs. Incisor's graphic user interface allows artists and animators to contribute directly to the apps and games developed with Incisor without code. One of the most useful ways in which Incisor empowers designers is by adding timelines to a construct. Using the Incisor GUI panels, let's set up for this tutorial. We are setting up a construct called Sample Construct with two graphic objects. In neutral state of my sample construct, we will manipulate the two instances of white box so that they appear as a red square and a blue rectangle. We can do this easily by using X scale and manipulating the color multiply effect node of each of our objects. Using the hierarchy panel, we will also place the blue rectangle inside a scene object, which acts as a container. Once we have an Incisor construct set up, one or multiple timelines can be added to it, allowing for dynamic keyframe-based animation. Now let's add a timeline to this construct. By clicking on Manage Timelines, the Timeline Manager appears, and we can see the option to add a timeline. And now name it. Let's call this timeline Idle. Now when we click on Neutral State in the Construct panel, we can select our new timeline. This changes the construct view from neutral state to our new idle timeline. The hierarchy panel now changes from reflecting the neutral state to reflecting the timeline view, which is indicated by the header. The hierarchy is no longer editable, as changes to the construct's setup need to be done in neutral state. But this list can be used to select scene objects. With the timeline panel open, notice it is also populated with our new timeline called Idle. Everything in our construct appears in the timeline list, ready to be animated with keyframes. The timeline panel header is where we can set up parameters of our current timeline, the basics of which are length and playback rate, as well as use playback controls to preview our animation. Let's set our timeline to be 2 seconds long and keep the playback rate at 1. There are also tools to control how our timeline list of scene objects can be viewed. Collapsing, filtering, and sorting all help navigate the timeline list, especially when our constructs have a lot of content and our animations become more robust. A basic example is the sorting toggle. The list of scene objects can match the hierarchy of the construct or be listed alphabetically. There are three main categories of keyframes: numeric, Boolean, and invocation keyframes. We'll cover invocation keyframes in a later video about advanced timeline techniques. Numeric keyframes are keyframes that require values, such as scale, position, or even color. Boolean keyframes appear as checkboxes for enabling or disabling scene objects, or for toggling visibility on and off. The timeline panel functions as we would expect, with time markings, an indication of our animation's beginning and end, and a playhead. Like all other panels with Incisor, spacebar allows us to pan and zoom. Let's first add some common keyframes to get to know animating with the timeline panel. By right-clicking on a scene object in the timeline list, we can see what is available to keyframe. Let's add a position Y keyframe to our red square scene object. By adding the position Y parameter, we can now keyframe that parameter by clicking the Add Keyframe button. Let's add some keyframes to animate the scene object on the Y-axis. Once a keyframe is placed, you can right-click on the keyframe to add preset easing. Let's make this scene object's Y position ease into the second keyframe. For more specific motion design, we can toggle the view between keyframe view and curve view. This allows us to tailor the motion between keyframes with familiar handles. Scene objects being used as a container can also be keyframed, as well as effect nodes that have been added in neutral state. Let's add some scale keyframes to our container scene object. And now some X position keyframes to the blue rectangle scene object within the container. Incisor effect nodes and add-ons are also able to be keyframed. Let's animate the color multiply effect node on our objects and keyframe them to change the color of our objects during this animation. As mentioned before, we can preview our animation with the playback controls. Let's preview it now and also change the playback rate. We can see the timeline list filtering more effectively now that we have some animated parameters. Incisor constructs and timelines combine to create a powerful dynamic animation tool and allow artists, animators, and engineers to collaborate seamlessly. Once a construct has one or more timelines, autocomplete will reflect their existence in project code thanks to Incisor's dynamic documentation feature. This concludes our Introduction to Timelines tutorial. Check the link in the description for more tutorials, and feel free to leave questions on our Stack Overflow and subreddit. Enjoy animating with Incisor.